Well, welcome everybody, and it is my delight to have Jan McCleery join us today, the first president of NAPNAP from 1973 to 74. Jan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, in light of NAPNAP celebrating its 50th anniversary, I am delighted to have you join us. And I was wondering if you could kick us off by just telling us what made you decide to become a pediatric nurse practitioner.
I had heard about the role, and I was in inpatient infant care at Children's Hospital in Columbus at that time. And I was fascinated with the fact that we could expand our role. And I was so frustrated being an inpatient nurse because I never knew what happened to the children after. And I didn't know if they got better. Did they ever come back into the hospital as older children? Because I was there only on the underage too. And so that really fascinated me. Well, then I heard about the grant that was provided to the Ohio Department of Health for a short-term program. And that was headed by Dr. Frank and Pat Cheney at the University of Cincinnati. And so I went to the Ohio Department of Health and asked them if I could be put on the list. And at the time, I was only working part-time, and it was in a family practice office. And then I was doing part-time at Children's still in the inpatient. So they said I wasn't one of the people that they would normally include in the program because the public health nurses and those in pediatric hospitals would have priority. So I sort of forgot about it. And one Friday afternoon in the office, I got a phone call from the lady at the Ohio Department of Health, and she said, Janet, you're at the bottom of the list. We've been through everybody's name and nobody can come to the program next week. This is Friday and it starts Monday. All righty then. I have 4 children, a husband, house to take care of, and a job. And I thought, now how am I going to do this? So my husband really knew that I was interested in this. So I called him and I said, can you handle this? Because I would go there for 2 weeks, Monday through Friday, come back home, and then we'd be home for 2 weeks and then go back. And that went on for 3 months. It was a short-term certificate program. And since somebody else dropped out, that's how I got in. And it was just, I was at the right place at the right time. And I've been truly blessed. That's happened to me a lot. And I feel very blessed to have this happen because it's been a wonderful career. And I still was working at age 82 in pediatrics. The pandemic is what shut me down. So I really am thankful for all this experience. It's been wonderful.
Well, that's such an amazing story, Janet. And the fact that you were willing to make the leap. I mean, that is tremendously brave into this new career. That is just phenomenal. So I'm wondering, in light of this being NAPNAP's 50th anniversary, can you walk us through some of those early days and really the founding of NAPNAP, because you really helped lead that?
Well, when I graduated in 1971, and in 72, we had a statewide meeting, which we had never had before. And we had it in Columbus, and that's where I was living at the time. And the program in Cleveland had just started, and Phyllis Cunningham, who was a president after me, she had headed that program. And they had graduated a couple of classes, and they were also a short-term program, and she was at Cleveland Metro Hospital. So we all got together in Columbus, and at that time, on a Friday, we met, and then on Saturday, we had our meeting. And on Friday, we went to Ross Labs and had this big tour of how they made baby formula, and it was fascinating. And then we had our meeting on Saturday and decided to form a state group. And we called ourselves the Ohio PNAs. At that time, we were called Pediatric Nurse Associates. Some programs were called nurse practitioners. That's why it's NAPNAP, because associates were in there. And so I was elected president. So I then started contacting, with the help of Ann at Ross and Glenn Clayball at Mead Johnson and the Academy of Pediatrics. They sent me the list of all the nurse practitioners that were registered with the Academy of Pediatrics. And so I started contacting them to say, what do you do in your area to educate your those that practice in your area? Do you have a formal meeting? Do you have dinner meetings? What do you do, if anything? Do you have a newsletter? And so I connected with all these people across the country, and they started sending me their newsletters and all their information. And then that was in 72. So then in 73, Tony Giannetti called me and said, I've got $5,000 that a drug company has given me if you want to start a national organization. I said, you're kidding me. I said, well, I've never done this, but I'm willing to try. So Tony also was very helpful because he had also helped the neonatal nurses organize. So he knew about that, and he had a publishing company, and originally we had our journal through him and our newsletter. And so I says, well, let's have a meeting. So we decided to have it in Columbus. And we had maybe 15 people from across the country, as far away as California, and of course, Sally up in Boston, and Texas, which included the military, because Rita was in the military. She was in the Air Force, and they had used nurse practitioners for a while. And so we got together, and in the morning, we just discussed what we all were doing and what our issues were, and where could we go from here. So then we took a lunch break, and those that were there were not only nurse practitioners, but also the Academy Pediatrics representative. It just so happened at Children's Hospital, the medical director of Children's Hospital was also the president of the Academy at the time. Now this is all, this is not fantasy. It all just fit together. And his name was Bruce Graham. And so he and Dr. Bruce Meyer came to the meeting, and then Tony Giannetti was there. And we invited ONA, and they refused to come. And then in the afternoon, we said, let's do this. And the Academy said, we will give you space if you want to have a meeting at our October conference in Chicago. And they said, well, how much space will you need? I says, I have no clue. I don't know how many people will attend. We don't even know how many will join, leave alone attend. So we sent out announcements to all those that were on the list of everybody that had a list. And we got 400 members. We charged them $10. And we got 400 members. The newsletter was free. And so Johnson & Johnson sponsored that. So we sent it out to all these 400 people. And I said to the Academy, I says, oh my goodness, I don't know. Let's say 200. Well, that's how many came. And we had a very spirited meeting, shall I say. The Academy is there, the ANA is there, and we were there. And ANA, of course, wanted us to join their PNP council. And Pat Pat. She was the head of the PNP Council within the ANA, and she was also there. Henry Silver was there, Dr. Henry Silver, who was the one that had the vision about this role with Miss Ford. And I was just thrilled to meet him. And so we broke again. There again, we had a break. And because there was lots of discussion, a lot of people wanted to talk. And so Dr. Bruce Meyer came up to me and he says, Janet, you take charge of this meeting. They are taking charge and it's your meeting. So we had the break and I came back and I says, okay, here's the deal. We're going to take a vote. How many of you want to join the ANA PNP Council? Because we'd all received information about it and we really didn't think we'd have that much voice within ANA. And they were, and every meeting I had been to with them, they were really turned off by the concept, saying it wasn't nursing. You want to be doctors, go to medical school. No, I don't want to be a doctor. I want to expand my role as a nurse. I want to think like a nurse. I don't think like a doctor. And so they overwhelmingly voted to have an independent group. And so that's how it started. And then we, for several years, always had our meetings and we would have a separate speaker for the nurses. And then we could attend the academy meetings for $10. And it was like a 3 or 4 day. And we got credits. And then we would have our little business meeting and a speaker specifically for us. And so it happened so fast. It was almost like a whirlwind, you know. I was flying all over the country and I had a job. My husband would pick me up at 5 and I would have this flight going out of Columbus at 5:30 and we'd have to go from Children's to the airport in 30 minutes. And I would be flying someplace, but it was exciting.
I mean, amazing. This is the birth of NAPNAP. And
Yeah.
as you say, it was just opportunity, strategic partnerships, and
Yes.
honestly being a thought leader and willing to start forging your own path forward. I mean, this is just amazing. And what strikes me, Jan, is that, you know, some of those things that you valued the most as a profession at the time, the networking, advocacy, and education, that's really at our core mission at NAPNAP even today. And it's just so amazing to hear how that's really endured over the last 50 years.
And, you know, I've heard leaders, political leaders and industry leaders, and they say it's not the person at the top, it's the people that surround you. And that is so true. Because I had all these nurses who were willing to, none of us got paid to go to these meetings. We had flight fares, but that was it. We had to buy our own food. We had to have overnights on our own. So it was not funded as much as we are now. And so we had to sacrifice in our personal lives in order to make this a go. And I think everybody should know that back in the day, we had $4,000 for our first budget for the year. And so we had to be very careful. And we were, I mean, and things were given to us by the Academy, by Johnson & Johnson, by Mead Johnson, by Ross Labs, by Wyeth, Shearing. All those companies were really supportive of us and we were thrilled.
That's amazing. And, you know, I can only imagine during the founding year of this national organization, I think this question is going to be difficult, but I'm curious if there's a particular issue that you recall being of utmost importance to the PNP profession during that presidential year of yours.
Acceptance.
Acceptance.
Acceptance of the role. And it's interesting. And I think Sally and I have talked about this, and we talked about this at a national meeting in 2013 in Orlando, actually, for the meeting, the conference there, is acceptance not by the physicians. The physicians were very accepting of us. They were very impressed by what we would discover on our physical exams and how we spoke to parents, and we trained residents, and they would always bring the residents with them when they would come to precept us, and they say, now see, this is very important that you know this. And acceptance by the nursing profession and other nurses. And I had been around for long enough, and I'm very outspoken, and they would, say, oh, you've got it made and you can do all these things. And I says, look, you had the chance to do this. It was free. You could have done it just like I am, but you chose not to do it. I've never refused anything that's free. If any free education, I'm ready to go, And so we didn't have the resistance from our colleagues, the physician colleagues, but it was an administration, and the Academy of Pediatrics was wonderful to us. But we did have resistance through nursing. And that was disappointing.
I can only imagine. And that's a really important piece of our history that I'm not sure everybody's aware of. They're aware of more of some of the contentious issues of today, but really it was our own profession and gaining that acceptance. Now, I wonder, Jan, if there are any other challenges that you recall within the board itself at NAPNAP as you were starting to launch this professional organization.
No, I think we were real accepting because we all had our roles. I remember Barbie Dunn and I had this disagreement on something. And, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have cell phones. And so I hand wrote most of my letters, and I wrote her a letter, and we agreed to disagree. And we were friends. I mean, it's not like we were, never going to speak to each other again. And when we set up the archives at the University of Virginia, there was reluctance at NAPNAP headquarters to send those letters to the archives. And Barbie and I said, why? Well, it says that you had all this controversy. I said, we had controversy, but it worked out. I mean, it's history. We don't want to not show the true story. We want the true story to come out. And we had disagreements, but we survived,
I think that's such an important point, Jan. And really what we know today is that it's those disagreements within the board that makes the board healthy. We all have to have that diversity of thought and ideas and be in a safe place where we can express those and disagree and come up with joint solutions and decisions. So I agree with you. I think that's so important.
Yes. And we always have to think outside the box. It's not just what everybody else thinks. It's what somebody thinks that's beyond that we expand our knowledge, and we have read evolution of our roles and evolution of medicine and care of people. So I don't know what their objection was, but I don't know if they ever got there.
Well, I love that, and really collectively moving our profession forward. I mean, that was just, those were really instrumental days. So I'm appreciative of your fortitude. Uh, I'm shifting gears a little bit to ask if there was, if you could talk to us a little bit about NAPNAP's educational efforts, and specifically anything relating to education or certification in those early days of NAPNAP.
Okay. Well, we started the newsletter right away, and we started the journal a couple of years later, and that was a form of education. And then some of the state programs or the local groups had their own little educational programs, and some of them were just business meetings, dinner meetings, and that just to talk and exchange ideas. But Phyllis was the education coordinator for NAPNAP. And so we had regional conferences, and we would have 5 regional conferences. And then, of course, we were always invited to the academy meetings. And those regional conferences were sponsored by drug companies. And we would have this, the pharmacies would display just like you have at the national meetings. And so those were very, very well attended. And we would do 5 a year. And we did those for the first several years until we started the national conference. So I think we've had, what, 35 conferences? Is that how many?
I think it's more than that. I'll have to get the exact number.
Okay. And up to that first national conferences, they were regional conferences. And we still, in Ohio, we still have our state conferences that are very, very well attended. And they're very educational. They're usually a day and a half, Friday all day and Saturday morning, and we get 10 CEUs. And then in 1977 is when we launched the certification program. We had always, that was one of our goals in the very, very beginning, but we actually got there, which was really not that much time, from 73 to 77. And we had a certification program through the academy, through the National Board of Pediatrics.
Well, again, I'm just struck by that's still our model today, that we have our chapters that host, whether it's board meetings or conferences, and yet we still have our national sort of unifying conference as well. So again, I'm just struck by how really the norms that you established so early on have really endured over time.
Yeah.
I may know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What would you say was the unifying issue that rallied PNPs to join and support NAPNAP?
Because I think they had a unique role in their own area, and they may have been the only one in their area, and they needed someone to talk to and to communicate with the issues that were so unique just to us. I remember one was in Louisiana, and she had been to our program but then moved to Louisiana, and she says, "Oh, please keep sending those newsletters and the journals." And she says, she always paid her dues because she needed just that connection, even if it was only through the written word, because she didn't have anyone to communicate with in Louisiana. So I think that was the driving force for all of us. Is in some instances, we were lucky at Children's in Columbus. We had several of us, and then we could talk to each other, and in Cleveland and Cincinnati the same. But in a little, Podunk, Iowa, you didn't have that. And they were looked forward to the communication.
I agree. Having that professional community, that network, is so important. And we now refer to NAPNAP as our professional home, because no matter where our career takes us, we have our home and our community within NAPNAP. So I love that, Jan. I'm wondering if you have a particularly memorable experience during your presidency that you would like to share with us.
Just that that first meeting was so exciting to see that just by communicating with people and having that one meeting in May launched this evolution of a national meeting or national organization was overwhelming to me. I was just amazed to be a part of it, and so blessed with all these people that were so smart and so willing to help children and so innovative. And I mean, I never had experienced anything like that in my life. And it was my 35th year of life. And I always, as a teenager, thought 35 is going to be my perfect year. And it was. My children were involved. My husband was involved. I mean, it was certainly a family affair. And it was just a wonderful experience that I'll never forget. My family will never forget. All my friends know about Nap Nap. And so it's just been wonderful.
Oh, I love that, Janet. And I think what I would say to that is, yes, it's been a wonderful experience for you, but we owe you a debt of gratitude for being bold and having the vision and to make it happen. That was just, it's amazing hearing your stories about those early days. Now,
well, I feel like it fell in my lap. And I had to take up the challenge, you know.
Yes, yeah. I love that. Now, looking back on Nap Nap's first 50 years, this will be challenging, but I'm curious if there's something that you are especially proud of.
The conferences are absolutely amazing. The certification program and keeping up the standards of our role is very important. I think we've been a role model for other organizations and other branches of nursing, that we have been so astute at keeping up with our with modern changes, because there have been lots of modern changes, and COVID is the latest. And I look back, and I belong to a group called Newborns in Need, and I love to do knitting and crocheting for babies. And 9 of us are nurses. And we talk about how during our careers, what innovation has taken place. And I've been a nurse now for 60, almost 65 years. And what has transpired, polio was, we had polio when I was first a nurse. We did have the salt vaccine when I came into nursing. And so that was the first time we could ever eradicate polio. We had measles, mumps, rubella, smallpox had been eradicated. But during this time, polio is gone. If we have children vaccinated, measles and mumps and rubella would be gone too. So it's just amazing what has happened in the last 50 years. It's just mind-boggling.
I agree with you. And can you even imagine what the next 50 will bring? I mean,
it's amazing. Yes. Yeah.
Well,
our
Janet,
we have great grandchildren. The twins, we have 5 generations of twins. And we have twin granddaughters, and we have twin great granddaughters. And I think of what's going to happen in their lifetimes that'll be so amazing. And we have 4 nurses in our family. Myself, my granddaughter is a pediatric nurse that works in a pediatric office. Another granddaughter is an ICU nurse, and she's out in California. And she graduated from Mount Carmel, where I graduated from here in Columbus, 50 or 60 years after I did, from the same college of nursing. And then I have another granddaughter who is a nurse anesthetist. So I think, well, I've got this group that's going to take care of people in the future. And we often talk about our nurse friends. We talk about who's going to take care of us. And we know that they're out there. And we know because they're all parts of each of our families. And it's gratifying to see that they've wanted to be willing to take up the role that we felt was so important.
Oh, I can't imagine. I love to hear that your legacy has really endured and following through the generations. That's lovely.
Yeah, except my daughter went to Mount Carmel. She only went 1 year because she already had her bachelor's degree. And she went to Mount Carmel in a special program, an accelerated program, and it was $30,000. My 3 years education at Mount Carmel was $750.
Oh my gosh.
That's what happened in 60 years.
That's for sure. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering, Janet, in all of your experience and amazing leadership over the years, could you offer some advice for our emerging and future NAP leaders?
Listen to those around you. You never know when one of those people might have a very inspiring message for everybody and may be a leader and have some thoughts and some plans and some ideas that will be very important for us in the future.
That's wonderful. My last question for you, Jan, is if you could go back in time and share some wisdom with your younger PNP self, what might that be?
Oh, wow. Not to take things too seriously. I'm not a person that does it anyway. I think I was always wanting to be perfect. I wanted to be the perfect president. I wanted to be the perfect mom. I wanted to be the perfect wife. And I couldn't be the perfect everything. And I think I wore myself out. I was busy all the time trying to do all those things instead of delegating. I have a hard time delegating. And when my husband retired, he retired much sooner than I. And then he took over some of the household duties. And that lifted a burden off my shoulder. And he was pretty good at it. He loves to cook, and I hate to cook. So that was a wonderful thing that got off my shoulders. And he was willing to do it. And he's been a wonderful partner in all this. He is just very proud of everything that's happened in our family. And so I think that's what I would do, is stop and smell the roses a little bit more when I was younger.
Well, I can tell you that your advice really resonates with me, and I can certainly attest that a commitment such as this, it really does take the entire family to commit to serving NAP in this profession. So I think that's wonderful. I can't thank you enough for the time that you've given us today. I want to give you the opportunity to share any closing thoughts before we go ahead and give you back your Saturday.
Okay. Have a great time at the conference. I just wish I could be there. I know it's at my favorite place, Disney World, and take time to network, not just listen to the speakers, but network with those who are with you, and network with people that aren't in your group, not just in your state group or your local group. Network with people from across the country, and you will be amazed at what they're doing. And I thank you for this opportunity. It's been fun.
Oh, thank you so much, Jan.